Welcome to the Head Shepherd podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO here at NextGen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, thank you to our two fantastic sponsors for continuing to sponsor this podcast. MSD Animal Health is perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia and for their Allflex range across the world, with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Heineken is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Heineken team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode.
Welcome back to Head Shepherd. You're with Ferg. Awesome to have you listening along. We're continuing on our genetic evaluation theme this week. We've welcomed Peta Bradley onto the show and to talk all things sheep genetics and the exciting changes that are happening there in terms of bringing the two LAMBPLAN databases together, so terminals and maternals. So a really good chat with Peta. We finish off this conversation talking about her addiction for swimming in almost freezing water, and Peter's really taken to ice swimming in the last few years and has represented Australia at a couple of different meets, and really interesting to talk through that particularly extreme sport. But before we get into chatting with Peter, the article that's on the web now is this week is one that I've written. It's about the science and type, I guess, the combination of those two things in breeding. And I guess a bit of an interest of mine is to look for the science that sort of backs up what breeders see, in particular sort of attributes of what we talk about as type, which might be jaw or bone or spring of rib or width across the pins or depth of hindquarter, all of those things that breeders will often be looking for in an animal. But I guess I always like to go and see if there's been any science done that links that to productivity, because I think where there's smoke, there's fire. There's reasons that these things have been important, but I think to have a really balanced breeding objective, we need to have, ideally, these attributes also have a breeding value so that we can kind of combine it all into one selection process rather than the kind of 2 or 3 tier type selection process that we often have, where we're trying to incorporate the numbers and the visuals. And so we're looking for faults, we're looking for a type, and then we're looking for breeding values as well, which is obviously 3 key things. So, a bit of an article I've written about how we can go about bringing those together. It was written over a few different sit-downs as I've moved around, some of it written on my phone on the plane and stuff. So it might not be as coherent as my best work, but hopefully I get across the point of where we need to go in breeding. So jump on the web. There's links on the hub to that article, and definitely let me know what you think. If you do know of any science that's scored some stuff in beef or sheep breeding, and have got the heritability of those traits and what they're correlated with. If you've found a paper like that, or you know of an ag note or something that looked into it, I'd love to see it. It was really hard to find anything much in the literature. I'd love to hear from you. In the article, I do cover the work that was done in New South Wales on selection for muscle score, which is a really great example of where the breeding value for EMA is only sort of moderately correlated with the visual muscle score, and both are heritable but are different things. And I think it's a great example of sort of type V numbers, and I'm really interested to investigate that a bit further. But love to hear from you on that front. We better get into this week's show with Peta Bradley.
Welcome, Peta Bradley, to Head Shepherd.
Thanks, Mark, for having me.
Awesome, Peter. We're probably a long time overdue, but anyway, we get there eventually on this show. You're obviously operations manager there at Sheep Genetics, a fairly important business in our world. Yes. How long have you been? I guess, maybe let's just go through your background and leading up to there.
Yeah, so I'm coming up 8 years at Meat and Livestock Australia here. Most of that, or all of that time, has been spent in the genetics team in one form or another. Finished up Bachelor of Rural Science back in 2017 here at the University of New England. Did an honours project in genetic parameter estimation for reproduction traits. So things that we now see as breeding values around conception and litter size and new rearing ability. And then, started my career with the sheep genetics team in the Merino Select Development Officer role, and have been fortunate to have a number of roles, senior development officer, and then spent a bit of time doing project management across the entire livestock genetics portfolio here at MLA. So that was really good. Got to work across our research projects in both beef and southern and northern beef systems. And then about 3.5 years ago, took on the role of sheep genetics manager. And yeah, really fortunate to work with a great team of 8 here at Sheep Genetics.
Yeah, cool. And I guess for those who are listening in Australia will be very aware of Sheep Genetics and MLA. I guess for those outside of Oz, obviously the national genetic evaluation for sheep. Yeah, give us your spiel. How many million sheep we've got running at the moment? There's lots of animals being computed every week or every fortnight.
Yeah, so we've got basically running at the moment our 3 main evaluations. So Merino Select, LAMBPLAN for terminal breeds and LAMBPLAN for maternal breeds. So Merino Select evaluation, we're up well over 4 million animals and over 600,000 genotypes getting crunched for 70 plus different traits every 2 weeks. And then we've also got our LAMBPLAN, 2 LAMBPLAN evaluations at the moment, which are a couple of million animals each and hundreds of thousands of genotypes, not quite as much as what we've got in Merino Select. And again, they're going every 2 weeks. We also run, whilst we're called Sheep Genetics, we also have a kid plan evaluation as well for meat goats here in Australia. So we're getting, each year we receive we're getting up to over 400,000 new animals into those evaluations every year. And roughly that's split half and half between LAMBPLAN and Merino Select at the moment. We're up to 1,000 clients. Majority of them, of course, are in Australia. We do have a number of New Zealand Merino Select clients, clients in South America as well, again, predominantly Merino, a few LAMBPLAN clients scattered around the world. And we also do provide the service for the National Sheep Improvement Program in the US. So they interact with us in a little bit different way to our standard sheep genetics clients, but yeah, NSIP or that program in the US, we do run their evaluations for them as well.
Yeah, cool. So a very important role in that international sheep industry. I guess one of the things we want to talk about today is some significant changes happening as we speak. LAMBPLAN, as you've sort of outlined, has been a maternal and terminal analysis for a long time, which has been really cool, being across flock, being able to look at those breeds within those. And so it's amazingly powerful within there, having been combined across breeds, which is a great thing about sheep analysis. We don't have to be within breed. But I guess the really cool thing happening at the moment is combining the maternal LAMBPLAN with terminal LAMBPLAN. And I guess one of the things I want to cover today is just that's going to be the biggest change that we've probably ever seen for people that have sort of been looking at these numbers for years and years, but just how positive that's going to be and the sort of opportunities that enables.
Yeah, I think 2025 is a really exciting year for us, Ferg. As you said, we're planning on releasing our first phase of the combined LAMBPLAN analysis as a research analysis in August this year. So I guess there's a bit of a history or journey in time of how our evaluations have developed. Because whilst 2025 we're launching this, we're also celebrating 20 years of sheep genetics in its current form, of when LAMBPLAN and Merino Select came together under the banner of sheep genetics back in 2005. So we're 20 years into that journey. As you said, in sheep, we've been running these multi-breed genetic evaluations for a long time. So we're actually celebrating 25 years of multi-breed across flock terminal evaluation. So we've had that going since 2000. So, and then we did the same. Maternal breeds all came together under one LAMBPLAN evaluation back in 2012. And then I guess in recent years, we've sort of had a snowballing of events and things that have actually allowed us to get to where we are and be able to look at combining these evaluations. So we've had those 2 multi-breed evaluations for a number of years. We've had the sheep CRC information nucleus flock kicked off in 2007. So we had lots of different sire breeds from, basically every breed being run and measured for a whole range of different traits head to head. We then had the MLA resource flock kick off from 2012. And of course, they're all being genotyped, these animals as well. So we've now we've had these evaluations, we've had these, I guess, research sites of animals being genotyped and measured head to head. And the other thing and change that we've seen, we've redeveloped databases and things at Sheep Genetics has really made this possible, as well as updates to how we utilise, say, genomic information in the evaluation as well. So it's been a whole heap of different things happening for a long period of time. The other thing that we've also seen, I guess, at a sheep industry perspective that's created the need and demand for this is, an increase in the amount of composite and crossbreeding that's actually happening between those terminal and maternal evaluations as they have been. So, at the moment, we actually have 35% of animals in common between those two evaluations anyway. So we've got good natural linkage, and that's been how people have been breeding sheep here in Australia for particularly in the last 10 years, and we've seen that increase over time. We've also seen the rise of, say, shedding composite breeds and people wanting to move their flocks or transition their flocks to that, and as a result, utilising different breeds of animals and needing that comparison. So we at Sheep Genetics are delivering it, but we're working incredibly closely with AGBU, and I know you've had Daniel Brown on the podcast, so the Animal Genetics and Breeding Unit based at the University of New England in Armidale, New South Wales. So they're really doing the hardcore research and development behind our sheep genetics evaluations and implementing that science into what we run every fortnight. So this has been a really collaborative project between our sheep genetics team and then also the AGBU team, who are doing the heavy lifting in terms of the research required to actually pull these evaluations together. The other thing that also has led, more people doing composite breeding, wanting to make these comparisons. The other, I guess, reason that we've started or went down this journey is genomic products like flock profile and genomic-only tools. They're certainly on the rise across both beef and sheep industries. And it's a really good opportunity to tie genetics, to create more demand and value from genetics. So we want to be able to provide those tools, but because of the composite and crossbred nature, you've got everything from second cross lambs to composite lambs. We need animals in the same evaluation to be able to derive those products. So that was sort of the really exciting opportunity that led us to start and begin to undertake this development.
Yeah, it's a significantly, it's a large area. I guess for those out there, I mean, we're kind of used to, we get our little heads in our sort of cutoffs, or we sort of know what a good number is and a bad number is on our evaluation. That's all about to change for us, which will be a little bit confronting in the first week or two. But obviously, you're going to run both analyses for a while, and so it'll come out as a research analysis. So it'll be, people can kind of still stick with what they know for this ram buying season, but increasingly, obviously, people will transition over, and then you'll shut down the old ones. But I guess part of any new changing the evaluation is the baseline changes, which will be the big shift that people will see in terms of on the ground looking at a breeding value buying a ram. It's probably that. It's knowing that you're going to have to get back in touch with your percentile band tables to understand what's good and what's bad again.
Yeah, that's right, Ferg. And it actually, like, when you start to say, the changes, and it is going to be a big change, and it was something we were really conscious of when we, really sat down and pivoted our work plan, because we recognised the demand for this type of evaluation. We needed to do it sooner than we'd planned, and we really sat down and with the team at AGBU and went, well, we can just put the data sets together and throw them at the evaluation, which is going to cause change. Or we can actually use this, if we're going to make change, let's actually make it better. So not only are we putting data sets together, but really reviewing how we're using data and setting up, we're having this massive evaluations of literally over, 5 million animals getting chucked at an evaluation every 2 weeks. How do we make that more efficient? How do we set our evaluation up for long-term success as we wanting to do more traits, or new traits coming on board like shedding and methane, things that we know that are not too far on the horizon. So we really took it as an opportunity to review, how do we use data, how do we run our evaluations, how are we using genomic information, and that the work plan sort of developed from there. So we also, I guess, one of my key lessons that I've learned over a number of years here at Sheep Genetics is just how we manage change, because it is people's businesses, and particularly for commercial buyers, they're not looking at this. Ram breeders, you've got your head in the game all the time. You can rattle off the percentile bands without even looking at them. Commercial producers generally, you're looking at it maybe a couple of key times a year, and that's it. So how do we really work with our ram breeders and manage this change. So we've took a really conscious approach that we want to roll research out and have people utilising these new breeding values as soon as possible, but manage that. So the way the development's happened is we've really focused on quite a modular approach. So we've broken up the trait groups into modules. So the first module will be the basic growth and eating quality traits. So and carcass traits. So the traits that people can first expect to see are around, your post-weaning weights, birth weights, weaning weights, fats, muscles, IMF, shear force, those core carcass and eating quality traits. So the intent is that will be the first run. It'll be available from the 15th of August, 2025 run. And then
you're on record now.
Yeah, we've put that out there, so I'm confident I can say that on the podcast now, Mark. It's the test runs are progressing really, really nicely. So, and then the intent is that this coming ram selling season that will be run in parallel with the current maternal and terminal evaluations, which have got all the traits. There's no changes to those, no changes to the indexes. So I anticipate this 2025 season, most people. People buying rams this season will be buying from the evaluations they're used to. I'd be really encouraging the ram breeders out there that might be looking and buying sires and thinking about their own sire selection to really look at both and start to get your head into the game of what has changed, because there's been so many different things that we're changing in the evaluation that really conscious we want to have the resources available. So definitely this coming ram selling season, it will be the evaluations people are used to, but certainly 2026 ram selling season when we've got more modules available. So the next group of traits we're moving on to is reproduction. So those component, conception, litter size, ewe-rearing ability, weaning rate traits that the maternal breeders are used to saying, but the animals that have been in the terminal analysis probably haven't been exposed to those before. So we're expecting them to be rolled out over the next later on in 2025, and then other traits like lambing ease, worm egg count will be rolling out, I guess, over the next 12-month period, with the intent that once all the modules are out, we will at one point in time, trying to minimise as much disruption as possible, shut off the existing maternal and terminal LAMBPLAN evaluations, and that will be replaced with the new combined one, which is really exciting because all those head comparisons and all the other efficiencies, it's actually a better evaluation. We've had really good evaluations. This one's better.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point for people to realise as they're going through change, is that a heap of effort going into making sure that any little inefficiencies or anything that hasn't been done as well as it now, knowing what we know now with all the genomics and all the changes that are happening in the whole world and computing and all the rest of it, that's all being incorporated into this new analysis. So it's not just a shift in where the baseline is, it's a significantly changed analysis. So it's going to be critical that, over time, the ram breeders get their head around it, and then obviously that will feed down through to ram buyers.
Yeah, that's right. And it's one thing that I guess, your comment around the percentile bands before, Mark, is absolutely critical. It's not necessarily the absolute number or that cutoff for post-weaning weight or birth weight that a lot of people have had in their mind is really just taking a moment to look at the old, and that's the beauty of running it in parallel. What's your cutoff? What percentile does that sit in the old analysis? Where does that sit in the new one? And just re-benchmarking what that number is that you're looking for is really important. And then also the types of percentiles that we provide from the evaluation is something we're spending a bit of time on. Is there'll obviously be the percentile for absolutely everything, but if you're buying rams, you're only interested in which animals make sense to be compared and have a set of percentiles for that group of animals. Just because we've got the ability to compare everything, it probably highlights even more than ever that the need to have a clear breeding objective and direction of where you're heading with your flock more than ever is critical when we've got this combined analysis.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, exciting times. I guess in addition to new analysis, so you mentioned methane. Is there other new sort of traits that are likely to see coming on stream in the next few years?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of different R&D projects happening at the moment that we see feeding into the evaluations over the coming years, and they're being funded through actually quite a variety of different places. So obviously methane and feed intake, people that have been involved in some of the projects collecting the data have just started to see project breeding values. The next step will be around research breeding values. probably merinos, and then the maternal type breeds in that combined analysis were where we've really focused our measurement. So methane and feed intake. There's also some work that AgBoo are doing that's being funded by AWI, the Australian Wool Innovation, around development of a fly strike breeding value. And again, we've seen project breeding values, and there's active data collection going on there. So I think that'll be another one in merinos that we'll see. There's projects happening at the moment where we've just, with a couple of shedding breeders down in Victoria that's been co-funded through AgBoo and with the Meat and Livestock Australia donor company to develop a shedding breeding value. So they've just redefined the shedding scoring guide, I should say. And the intent is that we'll roll out again research breeding values and fully fledged breeding values over the next couple of years as well. So that's an exciting one. Probably the other one is that you're involved and well aware of, Ferg, is around foot rot and feet health in Australian animals. It was amazing I was over the ditch with you last week to see the genetic progress that the New Zealand Merino Select population has made on actively using that foot rot breeding value that's been available has been a real credit to them. And obviously the work to try and replicate that in Australia for those people living in areas where that's a challenge. So I think that'll be an exciting one. So really that sustainability, welfare type focused traits is really what we'll begin to see. And I'd see most of those coming to fruition over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I was talking about, I don't know who that was with the other day, maybe Banksy, but yeah, talking about how we sort of kept thinking, oh, this must be it. We must be all the traits now, but there's always something. There's the beauty of breeders. We're always dreaming up new things, and most of them are under some sort of genetic control. So there's always new traits sort of that people are dreaming up and thinking about how we can incorporate.
Yeah, and I think the methane one, it's really exciting because it's just about efficiency. How do we create an efficient production system, which is what we as breeders have been doing for so long. But it's also in the scheme of the other technologies that are available around methane mitigation. It's such a long-term, cumulative, all the great things that we know about genetic selection, cumulative, permanent, and it's can be used with all those other technologies as well. It's the stackable is a term I've heard used recently with those methane mitigation technologies, and genetics is your base, and then you can stack other things on it, which is, I think, really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess one of the traits that's more of a recent addition is IMF. It's been around for a fair while now, but I guess it's probably only the last 4 or 5 years where people have really started making genetic gain in that trait. One of the really good things in the last few years has been the incorporation of just not, I guess, data coming from research groups. It's starting to incorporate data from those abattoirs that are collecting that information with animals that are obviously relevant. So that's been I guess that'll be a really important step in increasing the number of phenotypes and sort of building up our ability to make gain on those sort of traits.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Ferg, is I probably missed that in terms of my list of new traits, is that we've had obviously intramuscular fat, and equally importantly in lamb is shear force as well, which is a bit harder to measure in processes. Is they've sort of been the selection traits, and we've made, particularly our terminal sire breeds, it's a really impressive genetic trend around those couple of traits. Is sort of, well, what's next for those traits? And there's been some work that Daniel Brown from AgBoo's actually presented last week at the AAABG conference in Queenstown, really using lamb sensory, so where we've had lambs measured for IMF and shear force and those sort of objective assessments that have also gone in front of consumer taste panels. And that really highlighted that we can't just get really focused on IMF. Shear force explains a lot of the variation in consumer eating quality. It's just we just don't have technologies like we do for IMF to measure that in plant. Is really, well, what is our objective trait? It's actually consumer satisfaction with our product. So how we combine or report and express our eating quality traits over the next, in looking into the future, I think will be really critical. I think we'll see some changes to make sure we actually are selecting on the objective that we're trying to achieve, and tying that in with the rollout of MSA, sheep meat, the sheep meat model here in Australia, to ensure that if you're a commercial producer and you're getting feedback around MSA, that you can go and clearly link that to the breeding value traits that you're using when you select your rams, and thinking about new commercial genomic products for for producers, which is really enabled by this combined LAMBPLAN analysis. How, what are the traits we're reporting on that makes sense?
Yeah, great points. And yeah, we've got to keep reminding ourselves of the importance of shear force. It's easy to get, marbling's kind of, or IMF is kind of obvious, and everyone loves to see that. You can visually see that in a chop or a steak, and so we all get excited about that. And we know that there is eating quality links, but yeah, shear force is equally important. Just for those out there who don't know the terminology, what is shear force in terms of what's actually being measured on that for that trait?
Yeah, so essentially think of it as tenderness. So if you're actually making a selection on a breeding value, you want a more negative shear force breeding value. So essentially what happens in our research kills and how we measure it is we take loin samples and then we age those for 5 days, and then there's a device in the meat science laboratories that actually measures the amount of force required to cut through that piece of meat. So less force is better, meaning that the meat's more tender. And yeah, very clearly from where we've got loins that have had shear force measurements taken and then have been put in front of consumer taste panels, there's a really strong link between more tender meat, less shear force, and consumer satisfaction with that product.
Yeah, so we're all out. I mean, everyone's heard of those steaks or chops you can cut with a spoon, and that's kind of what we're aiming for.
Yeah. It actually it explains the genetic correlation between shear force and consumer satisfaction is higher than that with intramuscular fat. Both very important. I wouldn't say select for one over the other, but it highlights the importance of not just getting solely focused on intramuscular fat.
Yeah, I think all of us have had to chew our way through a bad steak or a bad chop at some point and understand how unexciting that was compared to the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be great if they're all that like those good ones that you have, and you go, oh, that is a good product.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I guess that's going. There's a RBV at the moment in beef, I think, or in Angus at least, for like an MSA.
Yeah.
Kind of. So I guess we'll head down that line, some sort of index between shear force and IMF, and
yeah, that's very much where our conversations are at, and how do we structure those traits in our evaluation. But there's over in that piece of research, there's over I think there's over 3,000 sires across all breeds. That's from merinos to Dorpers that we can all compare in one analysis there, and 3,000 sires is with actually that we've put loins from them, their progeny in front of consumers. So it's quite robust in itself. And then you add on 50,000 plus records for intramuscular fat and shear force is what that analysis was done on. So just how do we incorporate that into our routine evaluations is our next step.
Yeah, awesome. I guess the core underpinning technology that's sort of allowing all of these amazing things to happen at the pace that they're happening now and with the accuracy happening now is genomics, and how that's evolved. I mean, I feel like for 20 years we've kind of been hearing about SNPs and things and QTLs and whatever it used to be called, but now it's sort of matured into a really robust science that's really, probably is the underpinning technology that's resulting in massive genetic gain around for all sorts of species, but obviously sheep at the moment is what we're focused on. I guess I think there's a little bit of confusion around how that's used in analysis, maybe with some people, maybe, I don't know, think that it might be used as sort of some sort of magic or it's somehow manipulative, but I think it'd be good just for you to explain kind of how genomics is incorporated into the analysis and sort of why that's been really, really valuable.
Yeah, and it's also been, I guess, if I reflect on my last 8 years being in sheep genetics, of where we started in 2017, we just released single-step evaluations coming from some previous iterations of how we were using genomics. We sort of had, I think, our reference population across all breeds was about 50,000 animals or something, which was enough to get us going. Whereas I look where we are now, we're getting over 200,000 genotypes annually. We've got evaluations with, reference populations for traits like fleece traits, weaning weights of 400 to 600,000 animals, which is just, in an 8-year period to increase it by that much is just absolutely incredible. The other change is actually how are we utilizing genomic information in the analysis, and that's also one of the changes, because we've had that growth in reference populations, that we are making with the combined LAMBPLAN analysis. And I remember when I first started uni, and I've had a number of conversations with breeders. You're thinking genotyping, you are looking at the genes or looking at there's genes for growth, there's genes for, for muscling. The fact of the matter is most of the traits that we're dealing with in animal breeding, they're polygenic, meaning there's lots and lots of different locations across the DNA that are controlling the variation that we see. It's not a simple on-off. There's a couple of traits like that. So, pole horn is a really good example. We can look at a couple of key locations and we can get an animal's genotype. But the reality is most of the traits that we're dealing with are polygenic. So we have to really think about how are we going to utilize genomic information in the analysis. And essentially it's actually the bit that is critical is animals that are genotyped and phenotyped. So any animal that is measured for a trait and has a genotype becomes part of what we call the reference population. So prior to that, we were just relying on relationships between animals, half from mum, half from dad, a quarter from each grandparent. That was how the pedigree evaluations run. But we know through genomic testing is that the relationships aren't, on average, that's correct, but individual relationships can vary. So, and we see it in humans. You can be, you see a throwback to a grandparent or something. You go, gosh, they actually look a lot like that grandparent, but not like another one. And that is just the variation that you inherit through meiosis, recombination, and that the relationship you might have between your grandparent might vary from about 13% to 30%. And we see exactly the same thing in sheep. So the way we use genomic information is actually all about the relationships of that animal that you genotype to all, say in merinos, the other 600,000 animals that have got a genotype and a phenotype for that measurement. So it's all relationships. We're not looking at individual genes. Then if I think about the changes that we've made to the analysis, it's how much importance or weighting do we put on that genomic relationship versus the 50-50 pedigree relationship that we were using prior to that. So when we first started our journey into single-step genetic evaluations in both sheep and beef through LAMBPLAN in cattle, is we used to weight those relationships sort of half and half. We'd go, well, we value your genomic relationship at half of that of your pedigree relationship, and we use the combination of those to what actually goes into the evaluation with your phenotypes, because phenotyping is still incredibly important. This is just focusing on relationships. So we sort of used to weight them 50-50. But as our references have grown, we've got more animals with more genotypes coming into the evaluation. We can actually still, we're putting more emphasis on the genomic relationship. If that animal has a genotype, if that animal doesn't have a genotype, it's fine. It will still go in, it will still get breeding values. But if there's a genotype, we put more emphasis on that genomic relationship over the pedigree relationship. And that it's all about relationship. There's not some sort of black magic of looking for individual traits and genes and things like that. So the critical things of animal breeding is measurement is still really important, and that reference population is really important. High quality data is still important. Genotyping and then it comes into genomic selection, and that's really where we get the power, is not just an animal having a genotype, is then using the breeding values produced from that genotype to make a selection earlier in life for traits that would have been too difficult to measure otherwise, or measured much later in life. And that is really where we get the power of genomics.
Yeah, 100%, really well explained, and great to have that explained, because I think, we get various versions of when people hear that genomic or the weighting on genomics has increased, everyone thinks that, we don't need to measure stuff anymore, whereas that's completely inaccurate. We still need to measure things. Obviously, you can get away with some animals aren't measured, and that's sort of part of the art of now using genomics as well as phenotyping animals. You can kind of be more efficient with that, but we still need those phenotypes coming through, because it's not some sort of black magic. And obviously the importance of reference population is they need to stay current. You can't just make a 400,000 or 600,000 animal reference population and then live off that dream, because obviously recombination keeps making that reference population less and less valuable. So it has to be always remaining current, which I think is something else that we need to always keep in mind. That's something that I sort of dawned on me 6 or 7 years ago. But.
Yeah, that the concept of I think we call it reference population decay, is that it might be, if everyone was to stop phenotyping today, we'd be okay for a generation or two. But in sheep in particular, as we are using sires younger and we're turning the genes in our populations over quicker, we actually do need to have a maintenance of that reference population. And that the number of animals that we need is also dependent on the trait. So traits that are more highly heritable have different requirements to, say, our reproduction traits, which are more lowly heritable. So we do need more records to get the same level of accuracy of prediction. So it's a really complex area. Is reference populations, is how do we maintain them, and what level of recording do we need? And there's the other added complexity is there's harder to measure research type traits, like our eating quality traits, for example, that are really difficult to measure. And then there's other traits like your fleece traits, which producers are just routinely doing that as part of their ram breeding enterprises. So trying to get that balance is really critical, and that's sort of the next challenge. We've got these great evaluations that utilize all this information. It's how do we maintain that level of accuracy that we've got a bit accustomed to, particularly in recent years.
Yeah, I guess that's obviously a current challenge, and we had Jason Archer on the show recently talking about them thinking about that from a New Zealand angle, but also, caught up with Banksy lately, and he's always talking about how you keep those sort of reference populations alive going forward, and it's a big industry discussion that sort of will continue for a while, but essentially there needs to be mechanisms evolved that it can't always just be levy funds funding keeping reference population alive. There'll be some sort of combination, I'm sure, as that space evolves.
Yeah, the private versus public good component of it, and I guess there's really good benefits from being your own reference as well, because the next generation of animals that you're selecting, they've got really direct descendants that are in that reference population. So the private and public good is just, I guess, one of the things you need to add into the mix with the conversation around reference populations. And I know that's certainly something my colleagues are really focused on is how do we, there's research questions, and then the bit about how do we actually implement this routinely into our evaluation systems as well. So a complex problem with lots of different stakeholders that we'll need to work with to try and solve that one.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe just finally on this section, it's been, I don't know, it's a long time since I've been playing this game, but I feel like the momentum has sort of over the last few years has shifted, and like you talk about those numbers increasing through the analysis now. Like Merinos sort of were they were slower to the game than terminals and maternals, but we've seen a massive uptick in people signing up for SG and bringing those genomics, bringing those phenotypes forward, and so the industry's in a real momentum towards genetic improvement at the moment.
Yeah, it's certainly something I've seen at a couple of different levels, Mark, in my time, even reflecting on when I first started in sheep genetics. A lot of the conversations, I started in Merino Select, and a lot of the conversations initially I was having was, my breeding values moved, and you'd go and do some diagnostics, and you saw the level of recording in those Merino Select flocks was pretty limited in terms of pedigree, so lots of syndicate pedigree. We're trying to estimate the genes of that animal is going to pass on to its progeny. We don't even know who its parent was. So, yeah. That was really difficult. It also led to, trust of the system and things like that. And I guess the evolution of DNA technology, which in those merino businesses enabled them to get pedigree, and then, on top of that, genomic selection has really changed the types of conversations that we're having. And there's that which has helped build that trust, and then, resulting in genetic progress around in those flocks. The other thing, I guess, reflecting on a bit is our, I guess, approach to adoption of genetic tools and technology here in Australia in general is, I think in the early sheep genetics days, which really set us up nicely, was working with the key leading seed stock producers and going, hey, there's sheep genetics, there's breeding values, you need to come on board, the science is robust, this stuff works. And that was really, really effective at getting those, thinking of the adoption curve, is those early adopters in the door, becoming advocates for what we're doing, using the technology. But that doesn't work for everyone. And there was a bit of a change in, I guess, in tact and approach, over a decade ago, is to try and create the commercial pull through. And I think we're starting to really reap the benefits and see that is, working with commercial producers to create demand, that they want breeding values. They understand why they need breeding values in selection. And I think that has resulted in them having more conversations with their ram breeders, which has then resulted in them coming and having conversations with sheep genetics about how to get recording, and DNA technologies enabled them to jump on board when it might have otherwise been prohibitive to do pedigree in merinos in particular. And that's created that commercial pull through, which has then resulted in more clients and more animals, more importantly, going through our genetic evaluation. It's a good story though, because we haven't taken the foot off the gas in terms of genetic progress. We've got more people, but also still going harder than ever in terms of genetic progress. And I done some back of the envelope maths, and we've also done some, I guess, surveys. And the recent data sort of indicates 2015, 2016, there was about 30% of commercial producers utilising breeding values to make ram selection decisions, probably higher in LAMBPLAN breeds than merinos in that time. The latest survey and then estimates based on numbers coming through sheep genetics indicate that it's about 56 to 60% of producers utilising breeding value. So still a bit of a way to go, and there's probably a sector in there that are multipliers and things like that. But the fact that we've seen that growth and that's reflected in the number of animals coming through the evaluation is a really positive thing, but still a bit more work to do.
Yeah, but they're good stats. That's a nice lift. So yeah, that's awesome. I said that was the last question. It's not. Well, I guess one of the things that I think has contributed to that in the last few years, at least, is the flock profile technology, the opportunity, and then that's also obviously evolved because of genomics being available. But yeah, I think that's sort of enabled a really great gateway for people who haven't had access to the technology at all, but able to go in there and get a bit of a benchmark on their commercial use and just sort of know where they're at, so they kind of know where they should start a conversation. I think it's been a really great technology as a result of the sheep CRC and all the work that went within that and beyond that and since. But yeah, it's been a really underpinning tech.
Yeah, and I think I think it's been a great way to have start conversations around genetics in merinos. And I guess one of the reasons I'm excited for, I think that those commercial products coming out of the combined LAMBPLAN analysis in the future is really exciting for me. And I guess I'm excited to probably see how the usage of that changes. So at the moment, I very much see flock profile being, getting a gauge of where you're sitting and going and buying better rams, which is awesome. That's always going to be its bread and butter. But really excited about, I guess, the next iteration around, creating demand for improvement in genetics. And you start to see it a little bit now is, lots on Auctions Plus or, even in the sale yard setting or that repeat buyer relationship, however you're selling your stock, is having a descriptor of an animal of that mob level genetic merit, which flock profile enables, is really, really exciting. And if we could have animals being priced because they've got better genetic merit, which then drives that producer to go and purchase better rams, which then drives the ram breeder to continue to make genetic progress and not take their foot off the gas, then that's a really good system, and we've been really successful if we can get to that point. We're just starting to see drips and drabs of it now, but getting this product out for more breeds and then having people utilise that to market stock and also using their selection decision is sort of, we can achieve that. I'll be a very happy person.
And rightly so. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, yeah, and you're right. We're seeing those trends, and where the smoke, there's fire. So yeah, I'm sure it'll evolve, and that'd be awesome. We'll shift tack now and talk about trying to die in cold pools. You're an internationally acclaimed ice swimmer, which is not something I ever want to get good at, and not likely to either. But talk us through the ice swimming journey.
Yeah, so I guess look, I love my sheep and I love my work, but I've always loved my sport as well. I grew up swimming. Grew up actually near Glargenbone, which is not where you generally think of an ice swimmer to hail from, which is central west New South Wales, well over 40-degree summers. But I guess I was living in Armidale, which is actually a pretty cold place as far as Australian standards go anyway. And COVID forced our local swim group to start to look for alternatives when all the pools closed, and found myself in Jimeric Dam, which used to be the town water supply for Armidale, about 10 k's out of town, and started off in March, and that was all well and good. And then found myself in July, -7, standing on the side of the dam about to get in. And that was we started to think there's other people around the world that are doing this. And I really fell in love. Sport's such an important part of my life and balance of my life, but really fell in love with the feeling of pushing yourself and knowing you were doing something that was a bit uncomfortable, and
not just a bit. Anyway.
Not just a bit. And then I guess found that there was a whole international community around ice swimming. So I've had the opportunity to do some pretty cool swims, and did an ice mile, they call it. So that's actually, one thing I haven't told is the main rules of ice swimming, Mark, which is water's got to be below 5 degrees, nothing more than a normal silicone cap and a pair of standard accredited swimmers, nothing, no wetsuit or anything like that. And the other rule is you've actually got to be alive 30 minutes after you swim, which is a pretty important one. So I'll try and abide by that.
Seems like, yeah, I'd stick with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's ice swimming.
I wonder when they come up with that rule, how long should we think? Yeah, half an hour is long enough. If they die at 45, we could still let them claim it.
It's fine. It's actually, I kind of find it kind of funny in that a lot of the principles around keeping warm and rewarming, it's the same as lamb survival. Utilizing burning brown fat, having, body heat, the fact that, if you lose, water is such a good conductor. You lose body heat 25 times faster in water than air, which is, exactly the same if you're lambing on a cold, wintry, wet day. That's why we have problems with lamb survival, is because water is such a good conductor of body heat that it just saps them of energy. So weirdly, I've been able to apply the same concepts to lamb survival.
Yeah. No. So I guess, what is that? So you'll just continue to compete? Is their plan, or you'll I imagine it's not amazing for your body, or is it good for you?
I haven't been able to find scientific studies that I'm absolutely stoked with how robust they are around the health benefits. There's a lot of anecdotal benefits around it. I certainly think of it not so much as that I'm going to live 20 years longer because I've subject myself to it. I see more the benefits of challenging yourself physically and mentally, and how you bring that approach and mindset into absolutely everything else you do at work, is that you purposely go out of your way to make yourself uncomfortable. Got to get comfortable with the fact that you're feeling uncomfortable, which we find ourselves in those situations all the time with work and life. And the fact that I just see ice swimming as a way to train for that, and you actually feel you do get this euphoric high, I call it, after the fact, once you've gone through the rewarming process. But just being fit and active and challenging yourself in those ways, I think, is so important in life and farming and work and whatever else we're doing.
Yeah, 100%. So you were, I think, a gold and a couple of silvers at the International Ice Swimming event last year. What do those events look like? How long have you got to stick in the ice?
Stick in the water. So every 2 years. So there's an International Ice Swimming Association, and their goal and motive is to make it a Winter Olympic sport. So every 2 years they have their World Championship. So this was the second World Champs I went to. I went to one back in 2023, and there was one in January in 2025 this year over in the Italian Alps in a place called Malvino, which is actually close to where they're holding the Winter Olympics, I think later this year or next year. So it's a pool-based championship. So this one was a 50-metre pool, and there's a range of different events, everything from like a 50-metre butterfly. But the longest distance and the epitome cold water event is the 1K, which is where the king and the queen of the ice are sort of determined. So I'm an endurance athlete by nature. I like the longer distance events. So I did the 1K, the 500-metre freestyle, and the 250-metre freestyle. I like the challenge of being in for a long period of time. The shorter events, you see a lot of people, like there was actually a US Olympian, for example, racing in the shorter events, because you don't need to be able to tolerate it. You just need to be able to get in and race. Whereas the longer stuff, there's this mental challenge. You've actually got to stay in the water and racing in that temperature. So the water, whilst I said ice swimming's got to be below 5, it was well below 5. It was at 1.5 degrees, and it was cold. And it was so the 1K event, it was a nighttime swim. It's the oddest sport. So you go out and you're in your winter robe, and they say take off your clothes is the first thing the announcer says. There's no diving in ice swimming and no tumble turns. So it's anyone that's normally familiar with swimming, that's sort of a given. But you can get quite disorientated, particularly later on in the event. Even counting your own laps becomes a bit of a challenge. So there's wooden ladders, and I remember going in on this wooden ladder, a night swim, water's 1.5, and there was ice because there'd been people getting in and out. There was ice, trying not to slip, walking in, and you sort of just have to adjust very quickly, and away you go. At the end of the race, you get out. You've got to have, for anything longer than 500 metres, there's got to be someone on the deck. You all have to wear a safety belt in case you do have to get hitched out of the water at any point in time. They're people counting your strokes, all of those sorts of things. And then immediately after your race, you have to go into the rewarming room because you're actually about to get colder than what you were in the water. So what happens is you get what's called the after drop. So once you finish racing, you go into the warm room. And when you're in the water, you're vasoconstricting, so you're not sending blood flow out to your extremities. And that's fine. You rattle that off. Your body's main objective is to maintain your core. And then as you start to rewarm, you're bringing in that cold blood from your extremities back into your core. And you get what's called the after drop. And that's when your core temperature actually drops to its lowest point. So I've had my core temperature measured by a couple of doctors that were just interested in what I was doing. And the coldest I think it's dropped down to is like 31 degrees core temperature, which if you were admitted to hospital, you would be treated for moderate to quite severe hypothermia. And then you just have a bit of a shiver, and you burn a lot of energy, obviously, trying to get your core temperature up. And they monitor you, the medics are monitoring you, and then you're discharged. But that's the process of swimming and racing, I guess, in the 1K event.
Excellent. You still haven't sold me, but good on you for doing it. It's amazing. But yeah, anyone who listens to that and wants to take it up, completely nuts. But anyway, that's phenomenal, amazing. And any sport at the elite level is amazing, and that's no different. So yeah, awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good worldwide community, and not a lot of Aussies doing it, but the Kiwis in particular actually have a really strong team and rep on the international stage. So hats off to them. And they adopted me as the West Island when I was staying with their team over in Italy.
Yeah. Knowing a few Kiwis, it doesn't surprise me that they love jumping in ice water. But anyway, awesome. Last two questions we ask everybody is, what's the last thing you changed your mind about? And obviously ice swimming wasn't one of them. But I guess, we often want to know what people are changing their mind about, and ideally not about what you put on your toast this morning, but
Yeah, I was expecting this, but I don't know if I've got an answer. I actually found it really difficult, Mark, as most of you guests have when I've listened. There's probably two things. One relates a little bit to sport. It's a small thing. I got up the other morning, drove up to Armidale. As part of all my training last year was actually mentally training is as much as physical training. And one thing that I started to do was not use work travel as an excuse for not training that particular day. You know, when you've got a 6:30 flight, you're an hour from the airport, you've got all day of meetings and you go into a work dinner. Where are you going to possibly fit it in? And I started getting up before leaving at 4:30 to go for at least a minimum 5 to 6K run as part of my training. I could just put my joggers and go and do that. And I actually found myself, for the first time, I was driving up to Armidale. I needed to leave by 4:30 in the morning, and my alarm went off at 3:30 to go for that run. And I said, no, it's windy, it's cold. And then I rolled over, and 2 minutes later, I'm like, no, I'm gonna actually have to. I'm gonna have to do this because I can't do it later in Armidale because the weather's probably going to be worse up there. And I changed my mind in that point that I'm actually going to commit to what I said I was going to last night.
Awesome.
And sticking with it, it's hard and it hurts. But I think for whatever challenge I decide to do next, or if, those sorts of things and those sorts of decisions, when things are hard at work or whatever, surely it can't be harder than getting up at 3:30 to go for a run on a crappy day. And I think if you can commit to doing stuff like that, it makes the other challenges you encounter maybe a little bit easier. So that was one thing I've changed my mind on recently.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's a good one to do. And I guess as people out your way see some crazy person with a headlamp on at 3:30 in the morning running around the paddocks, is that how it looks?
Yeah, I've often been out, and the only other lights I can see are spray rig lights and things like that. Down the driveway. I don't know if they see my head torch and wonder what the hell that is, but I've certainly scared some family members that were out coming over early one morning to start spraying, and found me running down the driveway before 4 o'clock. So, yeah,
awesome. And the final question is, who's the best person you've had the opportunity to learn from?
That is probably the hardest question, Mark, because I've had the privilege of working with so many different people, and I think I've learnt different things from different people. Keeping with the genetics theme and focus, I guess I consider myself incredibly privileged to, my first manager was Daniel Brown, and I spent a lot of my early career on the road with Daniel. And at the time, I always say he was the manager I needed to give me such a good technical grounding that's really enabled me as the platform in my career to jump up. So I guess the ability to work with the likes of Daniel, who's been so intricately involved in our genetic evaluations for such a long time, so early on in my career, I've been incredibly grateful for that opportunity. And likewise, with the late Andrew Swan, both him and Daniel were people I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with, and I still get to spend a lot of time with Daniel. But in my early years, I think that's really enabled me to have the career I have in livestock genetics. But there's been so many other people, I guess, that have come and gone as mentors at different stages. But I'll keep with my genetics focus, and hats off to Daniel and Swanee.
Awesome, yeah. A couple of pioneers of the whole game there, and yeah, good people to learn from, obviously. Yeah, awesome, Peter. Thanks very much for your time. We better close it off there. We're closing in on an hour, which we don't often close over, so we better keep moving. But yeah, it's been great to have a chat, learn all about the genetic evaluation and the changes, and obviously a tangent to talk about ice swimming at the end there, but I'm sure people enjoy getting to know these people that we know professionally. It's always a bit good to learn a bit about the personal life as well. But thanks very much for your time, and look forward to catching up.
No, I appreciate having me on, Ferg. Thank you very much. And yeah, I guess if you're going to do change, make it worthwhile is my parting words.
Excellent. Thanks, Peter. Thanks again to Heineken, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Thank you to MNSD Animal Health and Norflex Livestock Intelligence. They offer an extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. We thank both of these companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.